What really decided the 2025 Ryder Cup? Was it superior European golf? Or were there invisible forces shaping outcomes before anyone struck a ball? This is the story behind the headlines. The logistical decisions, strategic manipulations, and unexpected variables that transformed Bethpage Black from golf venue into something far more complex and chaotic. The truth is that modern Ryder Cups aren't just won on fairways and greens. They're influenced by dozens of factors most fans never notice, from course setup philosophy to security protocols to the psychology of crowd noise. And at Bethpage, all those variables collided in ways that changed everything. Before we get started, if you're a real golf lover, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments who your favorite golfer is. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you even more amazing golf content. The tournament dates seemed innocuous enough: September 26th through 28th. Standard weekend scheduling for a major golf event. But the compressed preparation timeline told a different story entirely. Organizers reduced the usual setup days to accommodate unprecedented security requirements, creating logistical pressures that cascaded through every aspect of the event. Hundreds of volunteers, support staff, and players were compressed into a tighter operational window than any previous Ryder Cup. Bethpage Black, being a public course within a state park system, doesn't operate like exclusive private clubs with unlimited resources and flexibility. Every decision about walkways, broadcast infrastructure, and crowd flow had to be negotiated and reimagined. The result was operational gridlock disguised as efficiency. Security perimeters were established weeks earlier than normal. Every access point required additional screening. Crowd movement became monitored and controlled in ways that transformed the spectator experience from casual to regimented. This compression had psychological effects nobody anticipated. Small delays became magnified into viral incidents. Spectator frustration from long security lines translated into louder, more aggressive crowd behavior once people finally reached their viewing positions. The calendar wasn't just scheduling. It was the first domino in a chain reaction that would define the entire week. Course setup in professional golf is always strategic, but what happened at Bethpage crossed into something more deliberate. Tee boxes were positioned to maximize difficulty rather than showcase athleticism. Bunkers were rebuilt with steeper faces that made recovery shots exponentially harder. Fairway widths were narrowed to punish even slight misses. The greens told an even more interesting story. Speeds were adjusted not uniformly, but hole by hole, creating inconsistency that scrambled putting rhythms. Players accustomed to reading slopes and adjusting to green speed found themselves constantly recalibrating. What looked like poor putting on television was often the result of turf manipulation that only professionals could detect. Captains who understood these variables gained decisive advantages, pairing methodical putters with accurate approach. Players could neutralize longer hitters who depended on predictable rollouts. Every foursome pairing became influenced not just by player compatibility, but by strategic exploitation of course conditions. On broadcasts, it appeared like momentum and luck. On the ground, it was calculated warfare conducted through inches and fractions of stroke. The course itself became a participant in the competition, tilting outcomes in subtle but measurable ways. Then came the envelope controversy that exposed one of golf's strangest protocols. When Viktor Hovland withdrew due to neck issues, an obscure rule came into play. Captains pre-select a player in a sealed envelope to receive a phantom match result in case of last-minute withdrawals. Opening that envelope awarded an automatic half point before Sunday's competition even began. That single half point rewired the entire final day's mathematics. Captains had to restructure pairing strategies. Players lost their planned rhythms. The momentum carefully built over 2 days suddenly shifted based on administrative protocol rather than competitive performance. The envelope rule was designed to simplify withdrawal complications, but at Bethpage, it became its own form of chaos. Analysts have since called for reform, arguing that Ryder Cup outcomes shouldn't be influenced by paperwork and predetermined assignments. The irony is that a rule meant to maintain competitive balance instead introduced randomness into what should be pure athletic competition. For the first time in the Ryder Cup's extensive history, a sitting United States president attended competition. Donald Trump's appearance on day one created unprecedented security and logistical challenges. The Secret Service established protective perimeters that by dissected normal crowd flow patterns and transformed entry procedures. Fans who arrived expecting routine admission instead encountered delays lasting hours. Some spectators missed opening matches entirely due to security bottlenecks. The presidential visit literally prevented people from watching the golf they'd paid to see. But beyond logistics, the presidential presence fundamentally altered the event's atmosphere. Entire sections of spectators transformed from golf fans into political participants. Chants that would never occur at traditional golf events suddenly echoed across fairways. The energy shifted from sporting competition to something resembling a political rally. Different sections of Bethpage responded to the presidential presence in dramatically different ways, creating pockets of celebration and protest that had nothing to do with the golf being played. Players suddenly navigated not just course difficulty but politically charged environments that had no precedent in Ryder Cup history. The spectator experience at Bethpage exceeded traditional golf boundaries by significant margins. This wasn't enthusiastic support crossing occasionally into poor etiquette. It was systematic abandonment of golf's behavioral norms. Drinks were thrown toward players and family members. Coordinated noise designed to disrupt backswings became routine rather than exceptional. Sports psychology research has documented how sustained auditory hostility creates measurable physical stress responses in athletes. Muscle tension increases, swing tempo accelerates, decision-making becomes compromised. These aren't theoretical effects, they're physiological realities that impact performance. Players didn't collapse from technical failures or strategic errors. They cracked under psychological pressure that had nothing to do with golf skill. Captains noticed these patterns and attempted to mitigate them through pairing adjustments and strategic positioning, but by that point, the damage had accumulated across multiple matches. Bethpage transformed from venue into psychological battlefield, where every spectator became an active participant in outcomes. The line between home field advantage and hostile interference was obliterated completely. The 2025 Ryder Cup created a fascinating split in how different audiences experienced and remembered the same event. European broadcasts shattered viewership records, with fans staying awake through night hours to watch every shot. American linear television numbers were surprisingly subdued, creating an imbalance in narrative control. European highlight packages dominated social media, filled with underdog storylines and team unity narratives. American coverage focused on individual heroic efforts and unfortunate bounces. By the time Europe lifted the trophy, public memory had already diverged into separate timelines based on which broadcast and social feeds audiences consumed. This represents something new in sports media, not just different perspectives on the same events, but fundamentally different stories being told about what actually happened. Whoever controls trending narratives first essentially writes the historical record, regardless of what actually occurred on the course. While television cameras focused on player performances, the real strategic battle happened in captains' meetings and mobile command centers. Keegan Bradley and Luke Donald weren't just managing player egos. They were running analytical operations that would be unrecognizable to previous Ryder Cup generations. The envelope strategy that seemed like obscure protocol was actually a tactical consideration in pairing decisions. Late-night adjustments weren't based on intuition, but on data analysis, including noise mapping reports showing which holes featured the most hostile spectator sections. One remarkable example: pairing choices were influenced by which players' ball flight patterns intersected with particularly aggressive grandstands. If a player's natural shot shape brought them closer to hostile crowds, captains would swap them into different matches. This is chess played in multiple dimensions simultaneously, with variables that extend far beyond golf skill. Bradley reportedly changed Saturday night pairings based specifically on how certain players reacted to practice range heckling. Donald countered by positioning his calmest players in those exact zones. These invisible decisions, never discussed on broadcasts, likely determined multiple match outcomes. Beyond the competition itself, Bethpage's operational background was its own dramatic narrative. The week began with electrical infrastructure issues delaying security installations. Presidential motorcade routes required constant adjustment. Hospitality areas areas saw unprecedented changes in guest demographics that altered crowd dynamics. VIP sections were populated more heavily with social media influencers than traditional golf patrons, fundamentally changing the energy and behavior patterns. These influencers weren't observing golf quietly. They were creating content, and their energy influenced surrounding spectators who began mimicking what they saw online. Grandstands transformed from observation points into performance spaces. Rituals and traditions that had been private player habits suddenly became crowd participation events. By the final day, golf wasn't being watched traditionally. It was being experienced as participatory entertainment where decorum had become completely extinct. The real villain of the week wasn't any individual player or captain. It was variance, subtle wind patterns, strategic pin placements, and course condition manipulations combined to create what analysts now call volatility clustering. Certain holes played dramatically differently for morning versus afternoon groups, creating hidden advantages that compounded throughout the competition. These micro shifts cascaded through match results in ways that looked like momentum, but were actually mathematical. Course routing that punished millimeter-level errors, combined with manipulated green speeds, essentially gave Europe structural advantages before Sunday competition began. Match play format magnifies these effects exponentially. One unfortunate bounce becomes a lost hole, which becomes a lost match, which becomes a lost cup. When multiple holes tilt outcomes like weighted dice, it's not drama, it's systematic influence. When the final putt dropped and Europe claimed victory 15-13, the scoreline told only a fraction of the story. The 2025 Ryder Cup was less about golf excellence and more about control. Who possessed it, who lost it, and who realized too late they never truly had it. The presidential appearance, the envelope protocol, the crowd chaos, the course manipulation, all these variables collided to create a tournament where off-course forces became the primary narrative. Future analysts will study this Ryder Cup extensively, but fans will remember it for noise, controversy, and moments where sport transformed into spectacle. Bethpage Black wasn't conquered through golf skill. It was survived through adaptation to chaos. For years to come, this event will be discussed not as pure sporting competition, but as a cautionary example of what happens when precision, politics, and pandemonium occupy the same space. This was the Ryder Cup that broke conventions and possibly the format itself. From sealed envelopes to presidential security to weaponized crowd behavior, Bethpage revealed uncomfortable truths about what modern golf has become when spectacle overwhelms sport. The next evolution is already forming. The only question is whether anyone learned the right lessons from what happened when control became illusion and chaos became strategy.